A gorgeous woman can have any man she wants, but when she gives in to temptation and falls in love with her brother and his best friend, she doesn't realize what she has until she's lost it. One day in the 1950s, Naples, Italy, the commander gifts his future goddaughter a carriage from Versailles so she can travel in her dreams. As the young Raimondo stares at his sister's bed in awe, their father, Sasa di Sangro, complains of its extravagance. However, his employer insists that as the godfather, he only wants what's best for the children. Maggie soon gives birth to a healthy baby girl in the seawater, while their family watches. The commander decides to name the child after the ancient Greek city across di Sangro's home, inspired by the mythical siren who took her life after failing to seduce Odysseus. In 1968, Sandrino, Raimondo's best friend and the gardener's son, watches an older Parthenope emerge from the sea where she was born, enchanted by her beauty. While sunbathing, she reveals that her family is in the heart of Naples, implying they have the house for themselves. She then leads the man to her boudoir and lays inside the carriage without any clothes on. He requests to join her, but she teasingly refuses and only allows him to look at her bare body. As Sandrino circles the bed to admire her figure, Parthenope revels in his gaze. Later, he asks her to be his girlfriend, but she turns him down and says the future is bigger than both of them. When he wonders what she's thinking, she doesn't disclose her thoughts. During college admissions, the vibrant woman leaves a good impression on Professor Devoto Marotta when she remains unfazed by his interruption and rigid questioning. Meanwhile, at the Di Sangro residence, an older Raimondo refuses to lead his godfather's shipping company once Sasa retires. He'd rather work as a crew member and sail to the Baltic Seas, believing it's impossible for him to be happy in Naples, the world's most beautiful place. The family eventually gathers at the patio, where Parthenope reads a book by John Cheever and talks about her wonderful anthropology professor. Her pessimistic father laments that everything only seems beautiful when you're young, as life dulls with old age. Just then, her brother accidentally burns his lip with hot food, so she softly kisses him to ease his pain. Maggie notices her children's unusual interaction, though she doesn't say a word. Later, Raimondo catches Sandrino breathing in Parthenope's underwear and realizes they're in love with the same woman. That afternoon, he heads out to sea and stares hopelessly into the air. As he lets himself fall into the waters, his family anxiously watches from the patio. They feel relieved when he re-emerges, and Sasa reminds his daughter that her brother is fragile like him. In 1973, Raimondo announces he's traveling to Capri to meet Alba Nardella. Jealous over her brother's latest obsession, Parthenope walks out on him. The siblings snuggle intimately in the Versailles carriage that evening. By sunrise, the man invites his sister to sail with him and his friend, and to give in to temptation while they're young. They almost kiss, but she resists the urge and plunges into the sea. Eventually, the trio fulfills their fantasy and crashes a hotel on the island of Capri. As Parthenope and Sandrino plan their night, the woman gets distracted by John Cheever, who points out the couple's shameless display of hope. Enamored by the American, she approaches him and requests that he invite her out. At the cafe, Lidia Rocca sees her potential to become a star, so she briefly interrupts them to give her the phone number of Naples' best acting coach. As the casting agent leaves, the man drunkenly rambles about love's uncertainty and how it makes his life unbearable. When he loses his balance, Parthenope accompanies him to his room and finds it filled with manuscripts hanging to dry. She reads an unfinished page on failed relationships, which moves her to tears. She then asks to fall in love with him, but he gently rebuffs her and implies he's only interested in men. However, the writer acknowledges her beauty and teaches her that, much like war, it will open doors for her. When he falls asleep from intoxication, the woman admires her reflection in the mirror and begins to recognize the power of her allure. At the bar that evening, the two friends witness their romantic interest talk to a wealthy man, so Raimondo spitefully makes his advances on Alba Nardella. When the couples cross paths while headed in opposite directions, the siblings glare at each other. Once Parthenope is alone with her date, she realizes she doesn't want to sleep with him and refuses to kiss. Disappointed by her rejection, he insults her intelligence and calls her ordinary, but she smiles faintly, amused by his childish reaction. She leaves the affluent guest and encounters the American, who apologizes for his earlier demeanor. When they finally introduce themselves, the woman is shocked to find out he's John Cheever and exclaims she's read all of his books. Parthenope wonders if she can join her favorite author for a walk, but he politely declines as he doesn't want to steal her youth. Meanwhile, her brother stops Alba from removing her dress and asks if they can talk because he can't bring himself to be intimate with her. Later, Sandrino admits to Raimondo that he's in love with his sister while admiring her from afar. His buddy warns him that she doesn't share his feelings and that she's always running away. The men are heartbroken when they see her with someone else. However, Parthenope soon invites Sandrino to dance while a tragic love song plays ominously in the background. Raimondo eventually joins the couple and briefly sways to the sad music until he's left alone with his sister. His best friend then takes a snapshot of their special moment and rejoins them before leaving together. By sunrise, he's devastated to witness Parthenope and Sandrino kiss passionately by the beach, so he leaves. As the two make love in the open, the dejected man sits on the rails by the hill's edge, his weight shifting dangerously forward and backward. Overwhelmed with jealousy, Raimondo stares at the sky with despair. He then blows his final breath into the air and allows himself to fall over the cliff, ending his life. During the funeral procession, Maggie notices her daughter reject Sandrino's attempt to console her. Sensing their involvement in her son's untimely passing, she glares at the couple. At the university, Parthenope requests Devoto to supervise her thesis as he disappointingly rips her first submission. When he inquires about its topic, she tearfully explains that she wants to cover the anthropological causes for taking one's life due to her brother's loss. Moved by his students' grief, the stern professor consents to becoming her supervisor as long as they promise not to judge each other. He also suggests a different topic for her thesis: the cultural boundaries of miracles. At the Di Sangrio home, Parthenope listens to her mother fondly recall how she and her husband conceived Raimondo on their wedding night. Suddenly, Maggie's voice hardens as she blames her daughter for her son's demise, leaving her shocked. In 1974, the college student continues to mourn her brother and tries to find happiness. So, the young woman visits Flora Malva, a former theater actress who wants to help her become a star. She soon notices that the acting coach always hides her appearance. Thankfully, the butler satisfies her curiosity and reveals that a botched cosmetic surgery left her disfigured. Parthenope secretly follows her after dinner, hoping to catch a glimpse of her face. She gets caught snooping around, but to her surprise, she's invited into the privacy of her bath. There, her mentor begs to be kissed, as she hasn't felt one in 20 years since her husband passed away. The aspiring actress silently agrees to her request and demands to know what she looks like, unable to see her clearly through the mist. However, Flora argues she wouldn't want to be intimate if she did, so she shows her lips instead, and the two end up kissing passionately. Parthenope doesn't realize how lonely the woman truly is until she leads her into a room filled with dolls and laments about being childless. When she learns that her dad quit his job and spends most of his time watching the television, she worries about his sanity and visits him in their house. While Sasa believes a grandson will help him cope with Raimondo's loss, his daughter thinks it's a silly idea. On New Year's Eve, Parthenope attends an event with the now famous Greta Kuhl as a guest. Rather than be grateful for her Neapolitan roots, the actress mocks the backward city and its locals, who refuse to acknowledge their problems but are quick to blame others. Backstage, she sees an altercation between the star and a business tycoon who refuses to pay her in full after making an inflammatory speech. When they get into a scuffle, the man accidentally removes her wig, causing her to flee in shame. Parthenope returns the hairpiece to the disgruntled actress, who admits that she doesn't like Naples as it reminds her of poverty, and how her mother happily sold her off to everyone. Greta then takes the time to assess the aspiring star sent by Flora. While she finds her beautiful and unforgettable, she discourages her from acting because there's no passion in her eyes. As Parthenope heads out, she meets a charming Italian mob boss named Roberto Criscuolis. When asked what she thinks of Greta's speech, she says that it amused her. He contends that everything the actress said about Naples was true. She joins the man for a thrilling bike ride across the city and is initially fascinated by all the attention he gets in the slums. However, As Parthenope walks past the residents' cramped homes and poor living conditions, she eventually realizes the unfortunate reality of poverty. That night, she witnesses an arranged union between the Criscuolas and Casamicciolas, two of the city's most powerful clans. A couple representing both sides share an intimate moment in front of everyone to signify their family's reconciliation. Despite her unease, she tenderly looks into the woman's eyes, providing her solace amidst the shame of being watched. As fireworks erupt in the sky to welcome the new year, Parthenope learns that loud noises make Roberto nervous, so she gently makes love with him by the beach, briefly touching the waters where she was born. Her relationship with the Italian mobster continues throughout 1975, although whenever he asks what's on her mind, she remains guarded and refuses to disclose her innermost thoughts. Parthenope soon earns an anthropology degree with honors and a recommendation to publish her work. While everyone has family to congratulate them, no one attends her graduation. Devoto sees her sad expression and calls her attention to distract her. In the hallway, he reproaches her for finishing her studies late, and she explains that she tried to pursue an acting career. She humorously asks her professor if he's going to rip her thesis like before. Instead, he commends her dissertation and believes that, with further research, it can be published. The news thrills Parthenope as she wants to teach anthropology. Devoto warns her that she'll only end up becoming like him, but she doesn't mind, so the man prompts her to return in May. Weeks later, she realizes she's pregnant with Roberto's child. However, when she sees that her father is unfit to care for the baby, she decides to have it taken care of by a physician. As Parthenope anxiously awaits the procedure, the nurse tells her to stay calm and that it won't take long. Inside the clinic, the doctor instructs her to remove her clothing in preparation for the treatment. Sandrino visits her in Naples and explains that he left for Milan because he felt guilty over his friend's passing. While he thinks they're both responsible for Raimondo's demise, the woman blames him solely for keeping her preoccupied with his affection on that fateful night. Her ruthless and arrogant retort makes the gardener's son wonder if she's ever loved anyone. Parthenope reveals that he was her first love, though she acknowledges it was merely a product of their youth and that he'll find someone else to be his wife. When Sandrino bids her goodbye, she kisses her former flame, but he just stands there and doesn't reciprocate. Devoto eventually requests the anthropology graduate to help him evaluate examinees. While she isn't ready, she hesitantly follows him to the auditorium, as she has no other choice. During college admissions, she gives a pregnant woman a passing mark, despite failing the assessment and her colleagues' disapproval. In the following conversation, she discovers that Devoto's wife left him for someone else. However, when she pries about the only son to whom he's dedicated his life, he quickly deflects the topic and asks how her brother suffered his fate. Stunned, the aspiring lecturer answers that she and Raimondo gave in to temptation. When the professor assumes that her dad stopped being affectionate after losing his son, she realizes that he's right. Devoto then asks if she wants to hug, and Parthenope immediately embraces him. 7 years later, in 1982, he somberly tells his assistant that there's something she needs to know, and she likewise says that she has news for him. In his home, she excitedly shares that she's agreed to write about the miracle of St. Januarius for a journal. Meanwhile, her colleague reveals that he'll soon retire from his teaching job. Since he sees himself in Parthenope, he wants her to consider working in Trento University for a few years, and to lead the anthropology department in Naples once he's gone. During her appointment with Tezzarone, he opens up that the miracle weighs heavily on him. He complains that people expect him to perform it every year, and if he fails, he takes the blame. In the mass that follows, he tilts the sacred blood back and forth. Suddenly, a bleeding lady screams at the back, disrupting everyone who came to witness the miraculous event. Later that day, Tezzarone explains to Parthenope that some patrons have been distracting him. Unfortunately, they prevent him from completing the miracle, forcing him to wait another year. The bishop then encourages her to release all her sadness in the church, adding that it's the only place where she can freely give in to temptation without holding back. Parthenope humors him, wondering why she'll want to cry. Tezzarone then reveals a secret that she's never told anyone besides Devoto, that she chose to run away from motherhood. She attends a party at her previous residence and stares seductively at the priest, effectively catching his attention. That evening, as women gather around him, the man fondly recalls his wise mother, who reminds Parthenope of Raimondo, as he also knew everything and died young. Tezzaroni then shares his realization that God only ever tried to make people happy with the gift of childhood. He believes that the Almighty Creator eventually got distracted and gave in to temptation, causing the pure and simple world they once knew as kids to disappear. The next day, the bishop requests Parthenope to wear a jeweled garment. In the bedroom, she asks if he wants to know what's on her mind, but he isn't interested because he already knows. She decides to give herself to the priest and to temptation. After their passionate exchange, she further probes him, wondering if he really has insight into her deepest thoughts. When Tezzarone reveals that she thinks about time as it flows alongside the woes of life, Parthenope painfully smiles at the bishop and cries, unable to contain her sorrow. At Devoto's home, the professor informs her that he's finally retiring and expects her to take over his position. He leads her into a room so she can meet Stefan, who happily greets their guest. The man explains that his son's body is largely made up of water and salt. Parthenope touches his round belly and is amused when he giggles like an innocent child. Devoto lovingly leans on his Stefan's arm and bids his prodigy goodbye. As she's leaving, he walks alongside her from across the room and carefully watches the woman walk out. Many years later, a much older Parthenope retires after 40 years of teaching in Trento University. Her students inquire if the man in her photo is a former boyfriend, but she avoids answering them. The ladies ask her more questions, curious about her personal life. She jokes that she fell in love with the northern bacon, which is why she stayed in Trento and didn't return to Naples. Parthenope reveals that no one proposed marriage to her, and that she didn't have children because she didn't know what she wanted with her life. When the students wonder what she'll do now that she's retiring, she nervously fidgets and can't give them an answer. Outside her office, students and teachers send her off into retirement with a party. She bows before the applauding crowd in the same manner as Flora Malva, like a theater actress after her performance. Parthenope travels back to Naples and reminisces on the bittersweet memories she shared with her first love, Sandrino, and her sibling, Raimondo. She reflects on their youth and how they missed out on a perfect summer because they were unhappy with their lives. It dawns on her that, like her hometown, she was sad and frivolous, determined and slow-paced. As Parthenope stands by the rails in Capri where her brother took his life, she remembers the moment she was there years ago, before everything fell apart. She realizes that she was lonely in her youth, and all she ever wanted was a love that would help her survive, even though she knew it would someday collapse.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.